الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Before we start, inshallah, there was a brother this morning reminded me of a sunnah that we oftentimes we don't apply. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who apply the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the sunnah of sitting close to one another. This is sunnah. Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, one time he entered the masjid and he saw the people scattered all over the masjid. So he said, Mali arakum izin. What's the matter? I'm seeing you spread all over the place. So they used to sit closer together. And taqarub al-abdan yuaddi ila taqarub al-qulub, inshallah. When the bodies are close, the hearts become close. This is what is best. But if someone, for example, he come closer or he will leave, no, stay away from everyone, but don't leave. So it's not to make us leave or make us uncomfortable or something like this. But this is definitely something that is in the salah. This is important, as we know, to leave gaps in between. And the shaitan has his ways when people are scattered. The same thing when the Prophet ﷺ, when they would travel, they would come down and to rest, and they would go to different places. And the Prophet ﷺ forbade them of this. He commanded them to be close to one another. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our hearts close the same way that He make us always close to each other, inshallah. We were supposed to continue with some of the text or the athar from the book of Zuhd by Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak. But I wanted to remind myself and everyone with something that we've talked about many times. But this is how al-ilm is. Knowledge is to be done in a repeated way, because we need to be reminded all the time to revive the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and to be patient to achieve it, because it has so much great barakah and blessings. And as we heard in the salah, these beautiful verses in Surah Al-Hashr, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Al-Fasiqun, the rebellious ones, the disobedient to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, do not be like those who forgot themselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgot them. That's what that really means. It means, how can a person forget himself? It means when a person does not do what is benefiting for oneself. When a person lives this life in forgetfulness, he doesn't know what's benefiting for his own self. He just follow his desires, commit sins, live his life like this, without following the commands of Allah and being obedient to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is basically what it means. And if a person does this, he will be treated the same way. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it's mentioned also in the Quran, لا ينظر إليهم ولا يكلمهم. He would not look at them, He would not speak to them. And this is the meaning of نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. They forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them forget themselves as a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to be always in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would guide us to be what is upright and to do what is right. This is the night of Jumu'ah, and the day of Jumu'ah is the weekly Eid for the Muslimin. And mashallah, most of us, we know many of the sunnah and many of the things to be observed in the day of Jumu'ah. But just as a reminder, and I think that we talked about this before also, where Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah in his book Zad al-Ma'ad, which is a great book, Zad al-Ma'ad fi Hadi Khayr al-Ibad. It's called Zad al-Ma'ad, the provision for the hereafter, showing the hadi, the way, the guidance, the sunnah of the best of all of the human beings, which is the Prophet ﷺ. So he talks about the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in every aspect of life. One of which is, when he talked about the day of Jumu'ah, he mentioned 33 adab or manners to be observed. We won't necessarily go through all of them, inshallah ta'ala, in the 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but just some of the things that might be forgot or neglected. And the night of Jumu'ah is virtue, and not just the day of Jumu'ah. And the night starts from Maghrib till Fajr. So from the Maghrib of the day of Thursday all the way to the next Maghrib, this is a blessed time. but we don't make a specific action in these times. So for those who make specific night prayer only for the night of Jumu'ah, this is not from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ would pray the night prayer every day. So for those who making dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reciting Surah Al-Kahf, it's safer to do it during the day. Because the hadith, man qara'a Surah Al-Kahf yawm al-Jumu'ah. Whoever recites the Surah Al-Kahf in the day of Jumu'ah. So it's safer. Even though some said also reciting it in the night of Al-Jumu'ah counts. But to be safe, to recite it in the day of Jumu'ah, and the hadith is, inshallah ta'ala, authentic, whether it's marfu' or mawquf, and it's light from one Jumu'ah to the other. If we take the day of Jumu'ah from Salatul Fajr, as we know that the Prophet ﷺ used to frequently recite Surah As-Sajda and Surah Al-Insan in Salatul Fajr in the day of Jumu'ah, and he said this is the best salah of the week. إن من أفضل صلاتكم صلاة الفجر يوم الجمعة. He said that عليه الصلاة والسلام, the authentic hadith in Sahih al-Jami', that one of the best of your salah is Salatul Fajr in the day of Jumu'ah. So this is a salah, as every salah in Fajr, of course, we should not miss in Jama'ah. And reciting Surah Al-Sajda, Surah Al-Insan, the Prophet ﷺ used to do that continuously. كان عمله ديما. He would do it in a persistent way. It is not fard. That's why if it's once in a while, if a person would recite with something else, so that people do not think that it's a fard or part of Salatul Fajr, but it's to be done in a consistent manner. Yes, this is the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, as far as getting ready for the Salatul Jumu'ah, which is the most important thing in the day of Jumu'ah, going early for Salatul Jumu'ah, which is one of the deserted sunan that we have a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talks about at-tabkir to Salatul Jumu'ah, and I won't repeat them. A great hadith that talks about this. One of the hadith, there is no like of a reward that is mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, like the hadith that talks about the virtue of going early for Jumu'ah. You hear about great rewards for simple actions or major actions, but this hadith of al-Jumu'ah man ghassala wa ightasala wa bakkara wa ibtakar wa masha wa lam yarkab wa jalasa ansata wa lam yalghu, that the one, whoever takes a shower in the day of Jumu'ah, goes early for the Salatul Jumu'ah, walks, and he did not ride anything, so the walking counts for the person, and he sits and he does not make laghu, does not speak or play with anything while he's listening to the Jumu'ah, and then min al-imam, and he was close to the imam, the reward is lam yakhtu khutwa. Every step he takes كان له أجر صيام وقيام سنة كاملة, that he will get the reward of night prayer and fasting the entire year. The hadith is authentic, and there is no like of this hadith when it comes to the rewards. And you would if you find a hadith that talks about a reward that is different, you might question the authenticity of the hadith, and the ulama, they don't say that the hadith or grade it weak just because of the meaning of it, even though this is one of the ilal of the hadith, but you would find more likely that the hadith is weak. But this one is authentic hadith. Every step, a reward of an entire year of night prayer and siyam. So this is a great reward, because the day of Jumu'ah is a very important day, and it's the weekly Eid for us as Muslims, the week of ibadah and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the sunan that is mahjura, that is deserted by many people, and Ibn Umar radiallahu anhum, he mentioned this, is that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they used to pray when they come to the masjid all the way till the imam gets into the mimbar. They would pray 2 rak'ah after 2 rak'ah after 2 rak'ah till the adhan of Jumu'ah. And this is something that you would find deserted in many places, is not applied. And that's why the time of az-zawal, or the waqtul zawal, which is the time when the sun is in the middle of the skies, which is right before the time of dhuhr, 5 or 10 minutes before dhuhr, it's a time where it's makruh, dislike to pray a salah, nafl salah, without a reason, except in the day of Jumu'ah. Except in the day of Jumu'ah, it is not makruh to pray before the time of the zawal. So you can pray all the way till adhan al-dhuhr, and till the imam walks into the masjid, or a little bit before that, so that the person is not praying while the imam is on the minbar, of course. But I'm just saying to pray at this time. And if you come to the masjid, of course, you know, tahiyatul masjid is something that needs to be done. إذا دخل أحدكم المسجد فلا يجلس حتى يصلي ركعتين. If one of you enter the masjid, he should not sit till he prays 2 rak'ah. And this is at all times. And especially again in the day of Jumu'ah. Some people think that tahiyatul masjid and you sit read Quran. Sure, of course, it's mashallah is good. And if a person comes early for Salatul Jumu'ah, what should a person do best? Should he pray 2 rak'ah and sit and read Quran and make dhikr and salah on the Prophet ﷺ, or pray 2 rak'ah after 2 rak'ah and so on? There are 2 things to determine this. Definitely the salah is the best thing. As long as a person finds his heart in inclining towards making salah. So if you find your heart inclining towards reading Quran, sit and read Quran. If you find yourself inclining towards making salah, definitely this is what is best. This is one point to it. The second point is, as long as you're not bothering anyone, because the place is tight, for example, so when you make salah, someone has to lift his foot like this and then do like this because the place is tight and you have to make sujood in a very, if the masjid is crowded or something like this. But if it's spacious and you're not bothering anyone, definitely the best thing is to make salah as much as we can. And then a person can sit and read Quran, make salah on the Prophet ﷺ. So this is a blessed thing to come early for Salatul Jumu'ah according to one's ability, except the Imam. The Imam is the only one that is best for him to come to the minbar straight, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do. And the angels, as the hadith in Sunan ibn Majah and others, they stand by the door of the masjid writing down the names of those who come for the masjid, the first and the second and the third and so on. And then once the Imam enters, they enter with him and they close their books. So no more names to be written as far as the reward is concerned. But still, if a person makes it for Salatul Jumu'ah, at least the second rak'ah, which is not, of course, recommended, but he would then pray Jumu'ah so that he doesn't have to make it as Dhuhr prayer. So coming early and praying as much as a person can, this is from the Sunan of the day of Jumu'ah. Listening to the khutbah and the adab and the etiquettes and the matters of fiqh of the khutbah to Jumu'ah. This is fiqh. This is a chapter in the books of fiqh with regards to the Jumu'ah. There's a mas'ala also, can a person, is it permissible to travel in the day of Jumu'ah? The answer to this is, yes, it's permissible, as long as the adhan of al-Jumu'ah is not called. So if a person needs to travel after Fajr, no problem. As long as also, again, it's before the adhan of Jumu'ah, and as long as it's not hila or a trick that a person is doing so that he can miss Jumu'ah, right? Because al-hiyal or tricks in Islam is forbidden. Anything that a person would do to make a trick like that, like for example, someone in Ramadan wants to break his fast. So he said, let me travel. And a traveler person, he can break his fast, no harm. But he's traveling to break his fast. That's a hila. That's a tricky thing, which is forbidden, of course, for a person to do that. But if he needs to travel, it doesn't have to be a major reason for him to travel. He can be traveling just for no valid reason. He's just traveling. If he's traveling, he can break his fast. And no, of course, he has to make up the day, but not to do it with the intention of being tricky also. So the same thing for Jumu'ah, as long as it's before Adhan al-Jumu'ah. If the Adhan is called in the day of Jumu'ah, this is where it has some differences of opinions. And a person should not intentionally travel unless it's a necessity, or this is the time where the plane is, he did not find any other opportunity to travel except that time, then there's no harm for a person in that case. It's only if a person has a choice. If a person has a choice, he should not choose to make or to travel after the adhan, and he would miss Salatul Jumu'ah as a result of that. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, as we know from the Sunan of the Prophet ﷺ, and the issue of the Sunan also, the importance of following the way of the Prophet ﷺ in every matter in our life. This is something that increases one's iman. It brings all kinds of blessings in our life, and not just in small. There's no such a thing as small and major issues. This is in everything in our life, and we should have that eagerness always to know the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Making the ghusl, of course, in the day of Jumu'ah, and the time of it as far as al-ijza'. When we talk about something, the validity versus what is best. What constitutes the ghusl or taking a shower in the day of Jumu'ah? If a person does it after Adhan al-Fajr, that counts as if he made the ghusl for the Jumu'ah. But is that the best time to do ghusl for Jumu'ah? No. But someone goes to work, for example, at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he's not going to have an opportunity to make ghusl before Jumu'ah, then he can do ghusl from Adhan or Fajr, from the Adhan of Fajr. But of course, the best time for ghusl is before a person leaves for Salatul Jumu'ah. Or if he worried about his health or going from whatever, he can go earlier. So whatever there is a need, but to do it the best that a person can before he goes for Jumu'ah, because the purpose of it is to come to Jumu'ah, clean, took a shower, and this ghusl is ibadah, and you don't have to make wudu if you make ghusl for Jumu'ah, even if it's not ghusl al-janab, because the ghusl of al-janaba as a result of relations or so, this is of course is a must, and you don't have to make wudu. And the ghusl, there are two levels of it. There is the fard level, which also al-ijza. If a person dips himself into the swimming pool, for example, with madmada and al-istinshaq, making the madmada and al-istinshaq, and he comes out with the intention that this is ghusl, he done the ghusl. He doesn't have to make wudu. The most perfect way to make ghusl, according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, is to wash the private part first, and then make full wudu, or full wudu except the foot, and then to wash the right side of the body from top and bottom, and then the left side of the body, and then the rest of the body, and then the head, and to make sure that the water reaches every part of the body without using excessiveness of water. This is ghusl. And the same thing for the ghusl of al-Jumu'ah, even if a person is not in state of janab. Does he have to repeat the wudu at the end? No. Once he made ghusl, ghusl is higher than the wudu, and the higher takes over the lower. So even if you are at home, for example, and you coming for the salah, a normal salah, regular salah, you want to make ghusl instead of wudu, sure, you don't have to make wudu. You can make ghusl, but with the intention that this is ghusl, not I'm going to take a shower. It has to be with, like you go make wudu, you go make ghusl to purify yourself for the salah. So the ghusl of the Jumu'ah, which is very stressed, and some ulama said it's wajib. And it's more stressed than the witr salah, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said ghusl al-Jumu'ah wajib ala kulli muhtal. The ghusl of Jumu'ah is wajib. He used ﷺ the word wajib. It's obligatory upon every muhtalim, upon every adult, and that's only for those Jumu'ah is mandatory for them, which is men. Women, Jumu'ah is not mandatory for them. If they come for Jumu'ah, sure, no problem, but it's not mandatory for them. So this is the ghusl with the rulings of al-ghusl. The very detailed methods, one of which is the ulama they mentioned from the sunan of the Jumu'ah and the sunan before the salah and the sunan before wudu, is a siwak, to use a siwak. And a siwak is, of course, mathara lil-fam, purifies the mouth, and it's mardatun lil-rabb, and it's something that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can a person use the toothbrush instead of a siwak? There are two things also here. The toothbrush, you won't come and do it while you're standing in line in the salah, right? So this is not something that's going to happen just before salah and just before wudu. Using the toothbrush and the toothpaste, mashallah, this is good. And as long as the person, first of all, if a person doesn't, the first point is, if a person doesn't find siwak, definitely using the toothbrush, because if a person doesn't find siwak and doesn't clean his teeth with the toothbrush and paste and so on, then it's going to be doing the opposite of what the siwak is all about, to clean oneself, not to hurt and to harm others by having bad breath. And the angels also are hurt as a result of this, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. If a person have both, mashallah, this is good. So if someone is regular in using the toothpaste every day, don't stop there. If you have siwak, do it, no problem, mashallah. More cleaning is good, right? And at the same time, we should not stop if we have the means to use siwak and to keep it always fresh. And this is again, especially before coming to Jumu'ah, because the gathering, the Jam' is more than the normal salah. As we said, coming early for the salah, as he says Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, أن يشتغل بالصلاة والذكر والقراءة حتى يخرج الإمام. Coming early is a virtuous thing, and to be busy with the salah, dhikr, qira'ah, till the imam comes. To listen to the khutbah, which is wajib, and that's why the khutbah is such an important thing. regardless of the one giving khutbah. You don't have to like the khatib. You don't have to necessarily like the khutbah, right? The khutbah is dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it should be as the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, not giving the news to the people or talking about one another or finishing some business against one another. It should be something of dhikr, remind the people of the hereafter, the Jannah, the hellfire, the taqwa of Allah. And that's why even some of the ulama, they said that if the taqwa of Allah, the command to the people to fear Allah and to be dutiful to Allah is not mentioned in the khutbah is not valid. So that's why khutbatul haja that the Prophet ﷺ used to say would take care of this, and also to remind the people of the Jannah and the hellfire. It's a reminder, and it's not a lecture. Khutbah is not a lecture, but rather a maw'idha, a reminder for the people. But if people do not, this is the only time that they show up for Jumu'ah, which is a very sad thing, then of course it needs to have also some things for people to know some things and matters of the deen. Of course, reciting Surah Al-Jumu'ah and the subject of praying and the waqt, again, the karaha time is not in the day of Jumu'ah. There's no karaha before Salatul Jumu'ah. Also, one of these things that are to be observed before the dua in the day of Jumu'ah, and he talks about the many differences of opinion, that the Sa'atul Ijaba in the day of Jumu'ah, and the differences of opinions in when is it, whether it's from the time, the two major opinions, that Sa'atul Ijaba meaning the acceptance. There's an hour, and the Prophet ﷺ pointed with his two fingers that it's a short period of time. That لا يسأل عبد مسلم قائم يصلي, that he does not ask a Muslim standing making salah. That's what literally says. He's asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this short period of time, إلا استجاب الله له, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts his dua. Either from the time the Imam is on the minbar till the end of the salah, or before Maghrib. And that's why a person should do both. Or, as also mentioned by the ulama, it's like Laylatul Qadr. Laylatul Qadr, we don't know for sure when is Laylatul Qadr. Why? So that people, the last 10 days of Ramadan, 10 nights of Ramadan, they're doing the best they can. And if they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they make salah or ibadah the last 10 nights of Ramadan and i'tikaf and so on, inshallah, they got Laylatul Qadr. And the same thing for the day of Jumu'ah. So it's hidden for a reason. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise for people to do that the entire day of Jumu'ah. So even in the morning, a person can make dua, ask, even if you're driving, you don't have to stop and raise your hands and face the Qibla. This is the best way, of course, making dua. But if you feel like asking, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, istighfar, making dua. So this is, even though as the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, like Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu and others, they would say that it's just before Maghrib, which is also a time not to be missed. Before Maghrib, whether a person is in the masjid or not in the masjid. But it's a virtuous time. This is the end of the day of Jumu'ah. It's like the end of the day of Arafah, is like the end of Ramadan, the end of any time of virtue, the end of anything that is of virtue is very important. The end of the Salah is a very special time for dua before the Salam. So the same thing for the day of Jumu'ah. And the differences of opinion, that makes the person would make more dua throughout the day of Jumu'ah. Inshallah, not to give so much time, but there are so many things to be mentioned here. This Salatul Jumu'ah and the special things of Salatul Jumu'ah when it comes to which makes it different, a unique Salah, and that's why we have to give it so much importance. It's only one time a week, and there's no like of Salatul Jumu'ah, because it's not only Salah. There is khutbah, and there is 2 rak'ah, and there's the condition of a certain number of people that has to be there, and that people have to be resident and not travelers, and to recite the Quran loud during the day, which is something not the same for Salatul Dhuhr and Salatul Asr. And the specific warning against missing the day of Jumu'ah, Salatul Jumu'ah, that Allah would seal the heart of someone that would miss it more than one time, more than 2 times intentionally. So all of these things makes it important that we, and alhamdulillah, the Muslims, they give importance to Salatul Jumu'ah, but they should also give importance to the rest of the Salah. But Salatul Jumu'ah, as just to make sure that a person comes to the Salah, this is neglectful. But it's still, he made it for Jumu'ah, but we should do the best we can, what we can, to come early for Salatul Jumu'ah. The hour of the early hours, as also this is one is the first of the time, and as we mentioned before, the early generations of Islam, they would start coming for Jumu'ah right after sunrise. And you see that to some extent if you go to Makkah. Why? Because people are going for nothing but ibadah, and they know that they close the doors by 9 o'clock in the morning, so they want to make sure that they have a space in the masjid, so they would go early. It's a beautiful scene, mashallah. So, and now we have the comfort, you don't have to sit in the masjid like this or so. So if a person comes as early as he can for Jumu'ah, but to make dhikr and to make ibadah, again, not to make it difficult for oneself, but this is a good thing. And as we also mentioned before, some of the ulama would skip even sitting till sunrise in the day of Jumu'ah, so that they would come early for the day of Jumu'ah, because it's such a virtuous thing. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he said that he used to witness Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, when he goes for Jumu'ah, he takes anything from his home of food or so, and he would give it in charity on his way, sirran, secretly, but get exposed. So he would do that without anybody noticing this. And he did that as like istinbat, or taking it from a benefit of something. Ibn al-Qayyim heard him saying, إذا كان الله قد أمرنا بالصدقة بين يدي مناجاة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us, that was for the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, before they speak one-to-one to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, that they would give charity. It was obligatory, and then it was abrogated that it's only recommended. They would give charity before they would speak to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So he said, فَالصَّدَقَةُ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ مُنَاجَاتِي تَعَالَى أَفْضَلُ وَأَوْلَى بِالْفَضِيلَةِ. So before you get to have this munajah, ibadah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is something that is also appropriate to do so. And this is something that helps. If a person, before he do an act of ibadah, if you have the mean to give sadaqah, this is definitely something that has barakah in it. The day of Jumu'ah is a blessed day also in the day of Al-Qiyamah, and this is where the day where the believers, they would go see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how close they are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is how close they used to come for the day of Jumu'ah. It's the day when the day of Al-Qiyamah will be established in the day of Jumu'ah. It's the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ادخره لهذه الأمة. ادخره, when you save something for someone special, right? So this ummah is a special ummah. So the day of Jumu'ah was not given to the nations before. It was kept to the best ummah to be given the virtue of Jumu'ah. So أضل الله عز وجل, as the hadith says, Allah deviated the nations before, the Jews and the Christians, from the day of Jumu'ah, and He gave it to the Muslim ummah. And it was said that they were punished, Bani Israel, when they were offered the day of Jumu'ah and they refused. As always, they would refuse, they want something else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them the Saturday, and He forbade things on them and so on. So that's why the commands of Allah, or what's forbidden that was for them, was a punishment. But what's forbidden for this ummah is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to forbid for them al-khaba'ith, or what's impure and things like this. So to witness that and to take advantage of it. Whether the believers in their graves, they receive something on Jumu'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But as far as visiting the loved ones in their graves in Jumu'ah, there's no basis to it. And whoever believes that this is a virtuous thing, this is bid'ah. This is not something from the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But as we always hope for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. But there's no such a thing as visiting and things like this in the day of Jumu'ah. And there's a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in Sahih Muslim, لا تخصوا ليلة الجمعة بقيام من بين الليل. Do not make specific qiyamul layl for the night of Jumu'ah, different than the rest of the nights. ولا تخصوا يوم الجمعة بصيام من بين سائر الأيام. And do not specifically fast the day of Jumu'ah إلا أن يكون في صوم يصوم أحدكم, unless you have a habit of fasting every other day, or you fasted Thursday, you want to fast Jumu'ah, no problem. But to single out Jumu'ah, this is something that is not permissible. So all of that is to make the ta'zeem, to exalt the day of Jumu'ah. That's why even the recitation, what the Prophet ﷺ used to recite in the day of Jumu'ah, and even he would sometimes recite Surah Qaf on the minbar till they memorized it. As some memorized it, when the Prophet ﷺ would recite Surah Qaf in the Jumu'ah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us guided to do these acts of goodness, and to witness the blessed days and the blessed hours, and to witness this. This is wadha'if, or duties that needs to be observed, specific times, specific places, specific situation that a person is in. And these daily action this is what changes the entire world if a person is persistently doing it for the sake of Allah.